What happens when a soldier is forced to destroy his own base, and everyone in it to save the galaxy? You won't believe how far he'll go, and what survives after the blast. Ryan Cooper had seen death before. He'd stared it down in the cold vacuum of space, faced it across battlefields that stretched from one star system to another. But nothing could have prepared him for what now unfolded on the desolate surface of Dremora. The planet's crimson skies churned like a storm about to break, casting an eerie glow over the sprawling military outpost below. It wasn't just any base, it was his base, home to hundreds of soldiers, scientists, and civilians who had trusted him to keep them safe. And now, standing atop a jagged ridge overlooking the facility, Ryan held a detonator in his hand, a device capable of reducing everything he loved to ash. The comms channel crackled in his earpiece. "Lieutenant," came the strained voice of Commander Voss, her tone heavy with urgency. "You know what's at stake here. If we don't act now, the entire galaxy will pay the price." Ryan clenched his jaw, his gloved fingers tightening around the small device. He knew she was right. Just hours earlier, their surveillance drones had detected something horrifying, an anomaly buried deep beneath the base. Something ancient, something alive. Whatever it wasn't content to stay buried anymore. Sensors showed energy readings off the charts, pulsing like a heartbeat. Then came the reports of missing patrols, strange distortions in the air, and screams echoing through the corridors of the base. Ryan's mind raced as he replayed the briefing in his head. The entity, dubbed the Devourer, wasn't just some dormant relic of a forgotten age. It was intelligent, hungry, and if it escaped Dremora, there would be no stopping it. Entire civilizations would fall under its shadow. Billions would die. Yet here he stood, tasked with making a choice no soldier should ever have to make. Sacrifice his people or doom the galaxy. We only scratched the surface of this harrowing tale, but trust me when I say things are about to get far more intense. Stay tuned to witness how Ryan navigates the impossible decisions ahead, and whether he can live with the consequences. Ryan's boots crunched against the rocky terrain as he descended toward the base. Every step felt heavier than the last, each movement pulling him closer to the nightmare unfolding within those fortified walls. The once bustling compound now lay eerily silent, save for the faint hum of automated defenses still active along the perimeter. Above, the alien sky burned brighter, as though reflecting the chaos boiling beneath the surface. Somewhere inside, survivors clung to hope, or so he prayed. He reached the main gate, its reinforced doors slightly ajar. Inside, the evidence of panic was everywhere. Overturned desks, scattered datapads, and abandoned weapons littered the ground. A child's doll lay discarded near the entrance, its synthetic eyes staring blankly upward. Ryan hesitated, his chest tightening. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was personal. These were his people, his responsibility. A sudden noise snapped him out of his thoughts, a low, guttural growl emanating from deeper within the complex. Instinctively, he raised his plasma rifle, scanning the shadows. The lights flickered overhead, casting distorted shapes on the walls. For a moment, he thought he saw movement, a figure darting between the support beams, but when he blinked, it was gone. "Cooper!" Voss's voice broke through again, sharper this time. "What's your status?" "I'm inside," he replied tersely, his gaze never leaving the darkness ahead. "No sign of survivors yet, but something's moving in here, something big." "Stay focused," she urged. "If you find anyone, evacuate them immediately. But remember, the primary objective hasn't changed." Ryan swallowed hard. Evacuate them? How could he possibly justify dragging innocent lives away from safety, knowing full well they'd perish in the blast? And yet, how could he ignore orders when failure meant extinction for countless others? Each second weighed heavier than the last, forcing him to confront not only the enemy lurking in the shadows, but also the moral abyss threatening to consume him. We're teetering on the edge of catastrophe now. What happens next will change everything, not just for Ryan, but for the fate of the galaxy itself. You won't want to miss what comes next. The corridor stretched endlessly before him, dimly lit by emergency panels that flickered sporadically. Ryan moved cautiously, his every sense attuned to the unnatural stillness enveloping the base. The growls had ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed against his eardrums. It was the kind of quiet that screamed danger louder than any alarm. As he rounded a corner, he caught sight of the mess hall, or what remained of it. Tables were overturned, chairs splintered into shards, and blood smeared across the walls in chaotic streaks. Ryan froze, his breath catching in his throat. There, sprawled amidst the wreckage, was a body. No, not just one, dozens. Civilians, soldiers, even children. Their faces twisted in expressions of sheer terror, frozen forever in their final moments. But it wasn't the bodies that made Ryan's blood run cold. It was the marks etched into the floor around them. Deep gouges that formed intricate patterns, almost like writing. Alien symbols glowed faintly where the crimson stains pooled, pulsating with an otherworldly light. Whatever had done this wasn't merely killing. It was communicating, mocking. His comm unit buzzed again. "Cooper, report." Voss demanded. "I found the source of the disappearances," he said hoarsely, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's worse than we thought. This thing, it's playing with us." "Playing?" she echoed incredulously. "What do you mean?" Before he could respond, the floor trembled violently beneath his feet. Dust rained down from the ceiling as a deafening roar reverberated through the halls. Ryan spun around, raising his weapon, but the creature was already upon him. Towering and grotesque, it emerged from the shadows, a writhing mass of sinew and bone, its form shifting unnaturally as though defying the laws of physics. Eyes like molten lava burned into his soul, and rows of jagged teeth glistened with fresh blood. For a split second, Ryan considered firing, but instinct told him it wouldn't matter. This wasn't a fight he could win. Not here. Not now. Instead, he turned and ran, the creature's thunderous footsteps shaking the very foundation of the base behind him. Ryan's boots pounded against the metallic flooring as he sprinted through the labyrinthine corridors, his heart hammering in sync with the creature's thunderous pursuit. The walls seemed to close in around him, the oppressive weight of the alien structure amplifying his growing sense of dread. Every step was a gamble, every turn a potential dead end. His mind raced faster than his legs, calculating escape routes while wrestling with the grim reality of his situation. He couldn't fight this thing, not alone. But if he stopped running, it would catch him. And if it caught him, there'd be no second chances. The corridor ahead split into two paths, and Ryan skidded to a halt, his breath ragged. Left or right? Both options looked identical. Dimly lit, debris-strewn, and ominously silent. But then he noticed something. A faint trail of glowing residue smeared across the floor leading to the left. It wasn't blood. It was too luminescent, too unnatural. Whatever it was, it pulsed faintly, almost like it was alive. "Cooper." Voss's voice crackled urgently in his earpiece. "What's your status? Are you injured?" "No time to explain," he barked, his eyes darting between the two paths. "I'm being hunted. Something monstrous. I need an exit strategy now." "Hold your position," she ordered. "We're sending reinforcements." "There's no time for that," Ryan snapped, his voice tinged with desperation. "If this thing gets loose, I know what's at stake, Voss interrupted, her tone sharp but controlled. But you can't take it down alone. Find cover and wait for backup. Ryan clenched his jaw. Waiting wasn't an option. Not when every second brought the creature closer to breaking free and closer to unleashing its wrath on the galaxy. Ignoring Voss's command, he veered left, following the glowing trail. The path led him to a narrow service tunnel, barely wide enough for him to squeeze through. He hesitated for a fraction of a second before diving in, pulling himself forward on his elbows. Behind him, the creature roared again, its massive form slamming into the junction just as he disappeared into the tight passage. For a moment, silence reigned. Ryan allowed himself a brief sigh of relief, though his muscles remained coiled like springs, ready to spring into action at the slightest provocation. Then, without warning, the walls began to vibrate. Tiny rocks dislodged from the ceiling, pelting his helmet. The creature was still coming. It was tearing through the base, ripping apart everything in its path to reach him. Emerging from the tunnel, Ryan found himself in what appeared to be an auxiliary control room. Monitors flickered weakly, their displays filled with static and fragmented data streams. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burnt circuitry, and sparks rained down from exposed wiring above. Despite the chaos, Ryan's training kicked in. He scanned the room quickly, searching for anything that might give him an edge, weapons, tools, or even intel about the entity hunting him. His gaze landed on a console near the far wall. It was partially intact, its screen displaying a live feed of thermal imaging from various parts of the base. Ryan approached cautiously, his rifle trained on the doorway. As he studied the footage, his stomach churned. The heat signatures were everywhere, dozens of them, moving erratically, converging on his location. But they weren't human. They were something else entirely. A sudden movement caught his eye, a single human figure darting through one of the corridors. Ryan's heart leapt. A survivor. Someone had made it out alive. Without hesitation, he activated his comms. Voss, I've got visual confirmation of a survivor. Sending coordinates now. Negative, Cooper, came the reply, firm and unyielding. Your priority is containment. We cannot risk further exposure. You can't seriously expect me to leave them behind. Ryan growled, his grip tightening on the rifle. That's exactly what I expect, Voss shot back. You're too close to the anomaly. If you engage, you risk spreading it beyond the base. Ryan stared at the screen, torn between duty and morality. The survivor was heading toward the eastern quadrant, where the structural integrity of the base was already compromised. If they didn't get out soon, they'd be buried alive or worse. He knew Voss was right, but the thought of abandoning someone to die gnawed at him. Before he could decide, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness. Ryan spun around, raising his weapon. The glow of his suit's HUD illuminated the space just enough for him to see the shadows shifting unnaturally along the walls. Something was here, something fast. The first attack came from above. Ryan barely had time to react before a tendril-like appendage lashed out, narrowly missing his head. He rolled to the side, firing blindly into the darkness. The plasma bolts struck something solid, eliciting a guttural screech that sent shivers down his spine. The creature retreated momentarily, retreating into the shadows like a predator sizing up its prey. Ryan scrambled to his feet, his mind racing. He needed light, something to level the playing field. Spotting a malfunctioning panel on the wall, he fired a concentrated burst of energy at it. Sparks flew, and the room was bathed in harsh, flickering illumination. What he saw made his blood run cold. The creature loomed over him, its form shifting and writhing like liquid metal. Its body was covered in jagged protrusions that glinted menacingly under the erratic light. Multiple limbs extended and retracted at impossible angles, each tipped with razor-sharp claws. Its face, if it could even be called that, was a grotesque amalgamation of features, none of which belonged together. Eyes blinked open and closed across its surface, tracking his every move with predatory precision. Ryan fired again, aiming for the largest cluster of eyes. The creature recoiled, emitting a deafening shriek that reverberated through the room. But it didn't retreat. Instead, it lunged forward, forcing Ryan to dive behind a toppled desk for cover. The impact shook the ground beneath him, splintering the furniture into kindling. "This isn't working," he muttered under his breath, his mind racing for a solution. He glanced at the console nearby, still displaying the thermal feeds. An idea began to form, a desperate, reckless plan that might buy him some time, or get him killed. Either way, it was better than standing still and waiting to die. Ryan's eyes darted between the creature and the console, his mind calculating risks and probabilities at lightning speed. The thermal feeds showed the eastern quadrant was still teeming with heat signatures, both human and alien. If he could rear out power to the base's emergency lockdown systems, he might be able to seal off sections of the facility, trapping the entity inside a smaller area. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it would buy him time, and maybe give the survivor a fighting chance. The problem? The console was on the other side of the room, right in the path of the creature. Ryan clenched his jaw, weighing his options. He couldn't stay hidden forever, and every second he delayed increased the odds that the anomaly would spread beyond the base. Taking a deep breath, he made his decision. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled speed, Ryan bolted from behind the desk, firing wildly to keep the creature at bay. Plasma bolts ricocheted off its shifting form, doing little more than enraging it further. Its screeches filled the air as it lunged after him, tendrils whipping through the space like whips. Ryan dove for the console, landing hard on his shoulder as he slammed his hand onto the activation panel. "Come on! Come on!" he muttered, frantically tapping commands into the interface. The system responded sluggishly, its damaged circuits struggling to process the input. Behind him, the creature roared, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Just as its claws swiped toward him, the lights flickered again, this time brighter, steadier. A loud clang echoed through the base as reinforced bulkheads slammed shut, sealing off the eastern quadrant. Ryan exhaled sharply, collapsing against the console. For a moment there was silence. Then, from beyond the sealed doors, came the sound of muffled screams and the unmistakable roar of the creature. His stomach twisted. He'd saved the survivor, for now, but at what cost? The reprieve was short-lived. As Ryan caught his breath, the ground beneath him began to tremble violently. The monitors displayed new data streams, showing structural failures spreading throughout the base. The anomaly wasn't just hunting, it was consuming. Every piece of technology, every ounce of energy, even the very fabric of the planet seemed to fuel its growth. Ryan's comm unit crackled to life. "Cooper, status report," Voss demanded, her voice tinged with panic. "I've contained the immediate threat," Ryan replied, his voice strained. "But the base is destabilizing. If we don't act soon, this whole planet will collapse." "Understood," Voss said grimly. "Initiate Protocol Omega. You know what needs to be done." Ryan froze, his grip tightening on the detonator in his pocket. Protocol Omega, the failsafe designed to destroy the base entirely. It had always been Plan B, a last resort if containment failed. But initiating it meant sacrificing everyone still trapped inside, including the survivor he'd worked so hard to protect. "Negative," Ryan growled, his voice low and dangerous. There are still people alive in here. I won't abandon them. You don't have a choice, Voss snapped. This isn't about one base or one person anymore. This is about the survival of the galaxy. You swore an oath, Lieutenant. Now honor it. Ryan's vision blurred as anger and grief warred within him. He thought of the faces he'd seen earlier, the children, the scientists, the soldiers who had trusted him to lead them. How many of them were already dead? And how many more would die because of his hesitation? A sudden explosion rocked the base, sending debris raining down from the ceiling. Ryan stumbled, catching himself on the edge of the console. On the monitors, the thermal signatures clustered near the sealed doors began to fade, one by one, until only silence remained. The weight of failure settled over Ryan like a suffocating blanket. He had tried. He had fought harder than he ever had before. But it hadn't been enough. The creature had claimed its victims, and now the base itself was crumbling around him. There was no way out, not for anyone left inside. As the tremors intensified, Ryan found himself back in the central hub of the facility. The glowing symbols etched into the floor pulsed brighter, their light casting eerie shadows across the walls. The air felt charged, electric, as though the entire structure was holding its breath. Ryan knew what was coming next. The devourer wasn't content to simply consume. It wanted to expand, to escape. And once it did, nothing would stop it from spreading its influence across the stars. He pulled the detonator from his pocket, staring at it as though it were a living thing. In his mind, he replayed every order, every mission briefing, every promise he'd made to protect those under his command. But none of that mattered now. All that mattered was stopping the entity before it could break free. Ryan closed his eyes, taking one final, shuddering breath. When he opened them again, they burned with resolve. This was his duty, his burden to bear. Slowly, deliberately, he raised the detonator and pressed the activation sequence. Nothing happened. Ryan's heart sank as he stared at the device in disbelief. The failsafe wasn't working. Either the system was too damaged, or the entity had somehow interfered with the signal. Either way, time was running out. The ground shook violently, and the glowing symbols on the floor flared to blinding intensity. From somewhere deep below, a deafening roar echoed upward, shaking the very foundation of the base. Desperation clawed at Ryan's chest. He scanned the room, searching for anything, any way to trigger the failsafe manually. His gaze landed on a maintenance hatch near the far wall. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward it, dodging falling debris as the structure continued to collapse around him. Inside the hatch, he found a manual override panel, its controls sparking erratically. "This is it," he whispered to himself, his hands trembling as he worked the switches. Sparks flew, and the smell of burning metal filled the air. Finally, a single red light blinked on the panel. The failsafe was armed. Ryan didn't waste another second. He slammed the final switch, activating the countdown. A robotic voice blared over the intercom. "Self-destruct sequence initiated. T-minus 60 seconds. The realization hit him like a freight train. He wasn't getting out of this alive. The countdown echoed through the crumbling base, each second ticking away like a hammer striking an anvil. Ryan stood frozen for a moment, his mind struggling to process the finality of his decision. He had done what he set out to do, what he was trained to do, but now there was no escape. The walls groaned under the strain of the planet's destabilization, and dust rained down from the ceiling as if the very structure mourned its impending destruction. Ryan glanced at the glowing symbols on the floor one last time. They pulsed erratically, their light growing brighter with every passing second. Somewhere beneath him, the devourer stirred, sensing its own demise. Another roar shook the room, louder and more primal than before. It wasn't just anger, it was defiance. The creature refused to be extinguished without a fight. Cooper! Voss's voice crackled in his earpiece, cutting through the chaos. What's your status? Did you activate the failsafe? Yes, Ryan replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil within him. It's done. The base is going critical. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Voss finally spoke, her tone softened, almost unrecognizable. Lieutenant, I'm sorry. Don't be, Ryan said, forcing a grim smile. This was never about me. It was always about the mission. He cut the transmission, silencing the comms channel for good. Now it was just him, the collapsing base, and the entity that would soon be reduced to cosmic ash. As the seconds ticked down, Ryan took stock of his surroundings one final time. The monitors displayed static-filled images of the sealed-off sections, their once bustling corridors now eerily silent. The thermal signatures were gone. Everyone, friend or foe, was already lost. But Ryan couldn't afford to dwell on that. Not now. His survival instincts kicked in, urging him to move to find some semblance of cover. If he was going to die, he'd do it fighting. With a deep breath, he turned toward the maintenance hatch, ready to face whatever came next. As Ryan stepped back into the corridor, the tremors intensified, shaking loose chunks of the ceiling. Sparks erupted from exposed wiring, casting flickering shadows across the walls. The air grew hotter, heavier, as though the planet itself was preparing to exhale its dying breath. Ryan's HUD flashed warnings. Structural integrity critically low, oxygen levels dropping, but he ignored them. There was no point in worrying about survival when the clock was winding down. Suddenly, the ground split open beneath his feet, creating a jagged fissure that stretched across the hallway. Ryan leapt back just in time, narrowly avoiding falling into the abyss. From the depths of the chasm, a faint glow emanated, an unnatural, pulsating light that seemed to pulse in sync with the countdown. The devourer wasn't giving up. Even now, it clawed its way upward, desperate to break free. Ryan raised his rifle, firing blindly into the fissure. The plasma bolts illuminated the darkness momentarily, revealing writhing tendrils and shifting forms below. The creature screeched in fury, its voice reverberating through the base like a banshee's wail. Then, with terrifying speed, it surged upward, breaking through the floor and lunging toward him. Ryan dove aside, rolling to his feet as the creature slammed into the wall where he'd been standing moments before. Its form was even more grotesque up close, shifting, mutating, defying all logic. Eyes blinked open across its surface, locking onto him with predatory precision. "You want me?" Ryan shouted, raising his weapon. "Come and get me." The battle that followed was nothing short of chaos. Ryan fired repeatedly, aiming for the creature's core, or what he assumed was its core. Each shot seemed to slow it down, but only momentarily. For every wound he inflicted, two more appeared to take its place. The entity wasn't just healing. It was evolving, adapting to his attacks in real time. Ryan backed away, his ammunition running dangerously low. He couldn't keep this up forever. The countdown continued in the background, ticking closer to 0. 30 seconds left. 25. 20. With a roar of frustration, Ryan ejected the spent power cell from his rifle and slammed in a fresh one. This was it, his last chance. He activated the weapon's overload setting, channeling every ounce of energy it could muster into a single, concentrated blast. The rifle hummed dangerously, its casing glowing red-hot. The creature charged, its massive form barreling toward him with unstoppable force. Ryan waited until the last possible moment, then unleashed the blast. A blinding explosion lit up the corridor, engulfing both man and monster in a searing wave of energy. When the light faded, Ryan collapsed to his knees, his ears ringing and his vision swimming. The creature was gone, or at least most of it was. Fragments of its body twitched and writhed on the floor, attempting to reassemble. But it was too late. The countdown had reached single digits. 5, 4, 3. The robotic voice droned. Ryan closed his eyes, bracing for the inevitable. The explosion tore through the base with apocalyptic force, obliterating everything in its path. The shockwave rippled outward, shattering the planet's crust and sending plumes of fire and debris soaring into the crimson sky. From orbit, the devastation was visible as a brilliant flash of light, a supernova born not of stars but of sacrifice. On board the command ship hovering above Dremora, Commander Voss watched the inferno unfold in silence. Her hands clenched the railing tightly, knuckles white with tension. Around her, the bridge crew worked frantically to stabilize their position, shielding the vessel from the fallout. But Voss barely noticed. Her thoughts were consumed by one name, Ryan Cooper. "He did it," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's engines. "He saved us all." A junior officer approached hesitantly, holding a datapad. "Commander, we've confirmed the anomaly has been neutralized. No signs of residual energy readings." Voss nodded, her expression unreadable. "Good. Prepare a report for command. And make sure Lieutenant Cooper's actions are noted in the official records." The officer hesitated. "Ma'am, should we include?"
No, Voss interrupted sharply.
"They don't need to know the details, just that he gave everything to stop the threat." As the officer saluted and walked away, Voss turned back to the viewport, staring at the burning remnants of Dremora. She didn't cry, not outwardly, but the weight of Ryan's sacrifice pressed heavily on her chest. The memorial orbited not just as a tribute, but as a silent sentinel, a marker of humanity's resilience and the price paid for survival. Yet, even in the vastness of space, silence rarely lasts forever. As weeks turned into months, whispers began to circulate among scientists and conspiracy theorists alike. The anomaly on Dremora hadn't been fully understood before its destruction, and now, with no physical evidence left to study, speculation ran rampant. On the fringes of known space, researchers pored over fragmented data salvaged from the base's wreckage, scattered transmissions, corrupted files, and thermal readings captured moments before the detonation. Among them was Dr. Alira Venn, a xenobiologist who had once worked closely with Ryan's unit. She had been stationed off-world during the incident, spared the fate of her colleagues but burdened by survivors' guilt. Dr. Venn wasn't satisfied with the official narrative. Something about the energy signatures recorded during the final moments didn't add up. They weren't consistent with total annihilation. Instead, they suggested displacement, a shift, almost as if part of the devourer had escaped, slipping through dimensions rather than being obliterated entirely. Her findings were dismissed by higher authorities as paranoia, a desperate attempt to make sense of an incomprehensible tragedy. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy wasn't safe. Not yet. If you've made it this far, you've witnessed the beginning of an epic saga, one filled with courage, mystery, and the enduring fight for survival in the face of unimaginable odds. If stories like this ignite your imagination and leave you craving more, don't forget to subscribe. Together, we'll continue exploring the endless possibilities of the cosmos and uncovering the secrets hidden within the stars.